name is Dan. This is my wife Beth and our son Manny. When we adopted Manny recently, he was diagnosed with a terminal brain disease by the doctors, and we gathered the saints together and prayed for him. He was miraculously healed, but we still got a ways to go. We need a lot of prayer for his 100% healing.
This spring we had 5 adopted special needs children, and we heard of another child that needed to be adopted, and he was quite special needs. In fact, we were told that he might not live past the age of 10.
First time we heard about Manny, we had heard he was in really bad shape, and only a couple of families had come forward to possibly take him into their home. So we had a decision to make.
It was not an easy decision to take him into our home. We had 5 other children to consider, and knowing that he might die, I knew that I could do this. I knew that I could take a child into my home that had a terminal diagnosis, but was this fair to our children?
I worried that if we did not take him in, there was no hope for his healing. As their other 5 children had been growing up, they had all had very life-threatening situations at various times. So having gone through that and seeing God intervene and do miracles in their life, that gave us some confidence that perhaps if we took Manny in, God would do the same thing. So our faith was built up, and we were at that point ready to take on the challenge of Manny.
He came to live with us the day he was 9 months old. The first few weeks were a difficult adjustment, getting used to all the new things of his life, getting used to feeding a baby with a G-tube and holding a baby who can't hold his arms and his legs and just trying to figure out how to hold a baby that was like holding a sack of Jell-O. He couldn't move anything but his eyes. It's the only thing he could move. He couldn't move his head even 1/4 of an inch in either direction, and his hands were stuck in dystonia. It was very difficult just learning how to hold him.
So here he is, finally home, and he's choking. Sometimes he's not breathing. He's flatlining.
6 weeks after we had him, he ended up in the hospital with pneumonia. He had an MRI, and it showed the cause of Manny's problems. The neurologist said he wouldn't live to his first birthday, and for sure, not past Christmas. Showed he had an end-stage white matter brain disease that would kill him. I will never forget that horrible day. That day, my world stopped. I remember looking outside my hospital window, and I noticed all the people going to work, and life was just normal for them. But inside my little room, my world had changed. I felt cheated. I thought we're gonna have at least 10 years with him, and now they're telling me I'm gonna have less than a month. I signed the DNR. I made the funeral plans. I wrote out the obituary, and I wrote it out in days because he was less than a year old. And I made all these plans, and it was hard to do, but I had to because I'm his mother. Meanwhile, Dan was across town, holding down the fort at home with the other 5 kids. And there were times I just really enjoyed the solace in being by myself and being immersed in this. And there were other times I felt resentful that I was having to do this all alone, all by myself. I remember the nights we would sit there and we would wonder, is this the night? Is this the night that God's gonna call him home? Is this the night that we're gonna say goodbye to Manny? We went home with so much equipment you cannot believe it, to help him to breathe, to help him to swallow, because the doctor said he was going to lose his ability to breathe, to cough, to communicate, everything. So I packed the baby and all his equipment in the car, and I decided to leave all the talk of death at the hospital. And I said, baby, we're headed to life. We decided to live. We had fun. We would go to the park. We'd go to the zoo and the amusement park. We went everywhere with Manny. And we had the kids play with him, and they put toys in his hands. And little by little, we noticed that he could start to move his head, and he could open up his hands. He was getting better. But I never forgot there was a death sentence over his head. He would start these choking episodes, and all the doctors agreed that it was seizures, which was the last thing that was supposed to happen before he slipped into a coma and died.
The baby would wake up in the middle of the night screaming in pain for hours at a time. So I would go into some intense prayer for several hours, asking God to take him out of the pain, and the baby would keep crying. I felt like I just had to keep praying, even if there was no intervention right away, because I knew that God was stretching my faith, and if I just kept praying and kept pressing in, that God would honor those prayers. I learned to go forward in prayer, even though there was no proof that God was doing anything to change the situation. Where are you, God? So we go from these weeks where he seems to not be making it and everything is failing, just like the diagnosis said. But then all of a sudden, we start seeing a change, and he's making all these improvements little by little. He's progressing, he's changing, and he's doing the opposite of what the disease diagnosis was. So there's this complete 180-degree turnaround, and the doctors, when they see the change, they're just in shock. And I mean, one doctor's literally scratching his head and saying, this does not make sense. He's doing the opposite of what he was. So finally, we have our miracle. God has turned it around. Thank you, Jesus. And they take away the diagnosis and say, it's over. That disease is not there anymore. So we're halfway there. But the problem is, Manny still cannot walk. He's a quadriplegic who eats through a tube through his belly.
We want him to walk. We want him to run. We want him to do all the things that a 16-month-old is supposed to be able to do. Hello, America. I'm Beth.
And I'm Dan, and we'd like to ask you to join us in prayer for our 16-month-old son, Manny's complete healing. Thank you, and God bless.